Hi folks, welcome back to Raildig. In this video, we're going to look at different adhesives for joining pink XPS foam together. We'll then carve some rocks from the foam and try to minimize the visible seams between the foam layers. Visible seams in scenery are a real pet peeve of mine, and I'd like to come up with a way to minimize them as much as is possible. I'm assembling two pieces here, both 14 inches by 3 inches, using 3 layers of foam. This will give me 2 layers of foam to cut through. Well, 2 layers of adhesive to cut through. My 2 adhesives of choice in this video are 5-minute epoxy and 3M Super 77 aerosol spray. The epoxy application is pretty straight ahead, just stir well and apply. The 3M Super 77, while maybe easier to apply, the overspray on this stuff is incredible. It gets everywhere. The first time I used Super 77, I made the mistake of shooting it indoors, and even when using it near a window with a box fan, I spent a long time cleaning up. I strongly suggest using this Super 77 outdoors. Both adhesives form very strong bonds, but as you can see, the physical line or height is much larger on the epoxy. The Super 77 creates a much thinner and uniform line, and this is going to be very important in just a few minutes when we begin our rock cutting. As I sometimes will run foam through the Proxxon hot wire cutter that's been built up with adhesive, notice all the grooves in these 2 pieces of foam attached with epoxy. The hot wire catches a lot on the epoxy and it'll cause this grooved look. While the hot wire cutter is a very capable tool, if you push too hard, you can easily break the wire. Like that. I'm just cutting a very thin slice of foam attached with the 3M spray here, but it still goes through the Proxxon very easily. And here I'm just tacking on the 1 additional piece of foam to both scenes to give me the 2 adhesive layers for this cutting test. Here I've marked off the area where the extra piece of foam will go, then masked off the other side with blue painter's tape. With Super 77, I apply the spray to both sides, then let sit for about 15 minutes before attaching. Both adhesives are remarkably strong, and again here you can see the finer, uniform line that the Super 77 creates. I'm going to try and cut roughly the same kind of shapes into both pieces here for a good apples to apples comparison once I begin cutting. And of course, don't use nitrile gloves when cutting. Please, always use cut resistant gloves when doing this kind of work. I'll leave a link to the gloves I use down below in the description. I just checked and the gloves are actually cheaper now than when I bought mine several years ago. As of September 2025, they're under $10 at Amazon. I'll be bouncing back and forth between the pieces as I cut, so I've added a text overlay at the bottom of the screen noting which piece I'm cutting, the epoxy or the Super 77. The thing to look for here is when I get to one of the adhesive seams, you can really get a feel for how easy or difficult each one is to get through. As you can see with the epoxy piece, even after running it through the Proxxon earlier, there's a slight protrusion, a lip, of the epoxy. I'm just sketching out very loosely with a Sharpie where I want to make the cuts on both pieces. One thing I did on both of these pieces was to make all of my cuts kind of quickly, a bit faster than I'd normally work. I did this as I didn't want to go overboard trying to hide the seams. I kind of wanted the seams to stand on their own rather than working at hiding them. I think you'll see by this point the epoxy is much tougher to get through. To me, one of the big disadvantages here is that by having to use this much pressure, adding subtlety to your rock carving is very difficult. When you feel like you're fighting the piece with pressure, it sort of takes you out of trying to be creative. This one area was especially difficult. I'm guessing there was a bit more epoxy here. Again, this is just a test, but if I was trying to get creative here, maybe add a specific rock overhang with a cool cave, it'd be tough to achieve that while I'm fighting with this blade. Even after cutting away foam on both sides of the epoxy layer here, this epoxy piece, an epoxy tongue, manages to remain. If this was just a fun weekend project I was making here, say part of a small train layout or a nice little diorama, this kind of thing could really knock some of the fun out of it. With a lot of the big cuts taken care of, I'm now trying to do a little more subtle work, much smaller cuts with a single-edged blade, a bit of scraping for texture, maybe even try and create a bit of a cave. And I know I'm sounding a bit like a broken record, but having to dig and work around this layer of epoxy is just not what you want when you're trying to be a little creative and have fun. Okay, now here's another great example of this epoxy cutting issue. I wanted to carve a small V-shaped notch here, not too wide, not too deep. I used my Excel knife for this, and it should have popped right out, or close to it. It didn't, and I had to use the large utility knife for this simple cut. As much as I love using 5-minute epoxy for most things, I think I'm now going to be using the much more rock carving friendly 3M Super 77 aerosol. Here are two sample bits of carving I had done earlier. I was going to use just these two pieces for this video, but they weren't wide enough to illustrate this horizontal adhesive line issue. Halfway down on the piece on the left, you can really see the epoxy protrusion. Okay, we're done carving, and I gave both pieces a coat of gray primer and applied some basic weathering powders. To my eye, the horizontal epoxy lines are very, very visible. And here's our piece using the 3M Super 77, and the adhesive lines are much less visible. To me, this is a win. Again, the whole test was not about the rocks themselves. I wasn't too concerned about rocks, but with seams. I added a few bushes to both pieces, thinking this would minimize the appearance of the seams, and it might have worked to a degree, but those pesky seams are still far too obvious. Adding the bushes on the 3M piece also helped, and given the seams were less visible to begin with, to me, the use of the 3M Super 77 is the clear winner here. And here are the final shots of our two pieces. Now that I have my adhesive of choice nailed down, I can get to work on improving the rock carving itself. I think I've got a pretty good start here, and there are even a few details I like. I look forward to actually incorporating trains into this work. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video. I had a good time making this one and learned quite a bit too. If you like this video and want to see more like it, please help us grow the channel with a like, a comment, and by subscribing. Thanks, and we'll see you in the next video.